All right, welcome everyone to our ACI-Ontario Chapter virtual annual general meeting. Unfortunately, we used to meet out on the golf course and have a great day golfing, but in these new times with COVID and whatnot, we are stuck behind our computer screens. So we hope to make it just as exciting, but no golf balls whizzing by each other's heads. My name is Brian Schultz. I am your current chapter president, probably for about another, I don't know, hour, 90 minutes, and then a new one will be coming on board. You'll get that information once we're done today's presentation. I just wanted to start off with a few comments about ACI and what we've been doing the last little bit. The chapter actually had a successful 2020 despite the COVID pandemic. Our financial situation improved due to increased demand in certifications, which was quite the challenge. Membership renewals also still continue to be a challenge, and we're looking on ways of increasing that. And for all you out there who are members and haven't paid up yet, please do so. It's more time than ever right now that we need our contributions and renewals to our memberships. Continuing on with the new ACI CSA based field testing technician certifications now includes a new STC component, and the Canadian Certification Committee, comprising all certifying groups across Canada, did an excellent job on updating the workbooks and exam questions. The chapter issued 150 new field testing technicians, 37 advanced flatwork finisher, and 14 SCC certifications in 2020, which again was a huge challenge with the times that we were dealing with. Our thanks go out to Concrete Ontario and all their dedication during the pandemic. If any of you were involved in any of those certifications, you'll know the steps that needed to take place in order to get this done safely and within guidelines in the different regions. Our go-to webinars began last year with a successful virtual fall concrete webinar series in September. We had 103 people register for a 3-day event, and we continue looking at continuing to do that this year in the fall. Unless things change and we're actually able to finally get together. The chapter scholarships continue to acknowledge the excellent work of our Ontario University students. We honor the work of students at Ryerson, Waterloo, Western, and U of T with annual scholarships of $1,000. The Nick Bata Ontario chapter graduate scholarship annual donation will be increased this year from $2,000 to $5,000, actually beginning next year. And the board has agreed to partner with the ACI Foundation to administer the scholarship for the next 5 years. So it's a big thing. We're supporting our younger graduates and hoping they get into our industry and really have impact in all things concrete related. So that being said, we're gonna move on to our presentation. And I'm just going to find my information here. I would like to introduce Steve Morrissey. He's the Executive Vice President, Cement Association of Canada. Steve joined the Cement Association of Canada in 2008 as a policy advisor regarding issues impacting the competitiveness of the Canadian cement manufacturing industry. Since that time, he has taken on responsibility for corporate government matters and the management of policy files, and serves as Executive Vice President and Secretary to the Board of Directors. Prior to joining the CAC, Steve served as a political policy advisor for a minister at the federal level and as a government relations consultant. He has a background as corporate and commercial counsel. Born in Saskatchewan, Steve received a business and economics degree at St. Francis Xavier University and later a law degree at Queen's University. Now he resides and works in Ottawa. Steve, I will pass it on to you for your presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the introduction. I will share my screen here momentarily. I don't have control yet.
Try again. Clicked on make Steve the presenter. Nothing yet?
Here it comes.
Oh, here it comes. There it goes. There we go.
All good?
All good. Good to go.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you again for the introduction and the invitation to speak with you all about a topic that's not getting a lot of attention in the media, for better or for worse. It's how governments in Ontario and the federal government are impacting the cement, concrete, and construction industry in Ontario. I would say that the industry has been doing better than many of the other service sectors, which are highly impacted. And so sometimes when we're speaking to governments, we don't actually like to highlight that the industry has it somewhat better than some other industries. But let's get into it and see how the governments have sort of played with our construction. So very briefly, in 15 minutes, I've got a lot of these slides and I'm going to share them with you all. And I'm going to share our forecast, which is coming out, our spring forecast. I want to look at how two things, how the governments have managed the spread of the virus and how they've managed the economic part of that. And then I want to look at two important parts of what the governments have done. One is the financial support for businesses, what their investments in infrastructure have been, but also, I think very important, particularly in Ontario, what policy measures have been taken to support construction. And then very briefly, I'll look at the economic outlook for Ontario. So I'd say that in the first part of managing the virus, governments have not done a very good job. You know, we all know now that the Ford government's pointing the finger at the Trudeau government and vice versa about different elements under the both responsibility. And the net impact is both are taking hits in the polls and losing credibility. It's amazing to me, if not some others, that after 12, 14 months of the COVID, we're now just dealing seriously with some of these issues. But anyway, here we go. Border controls. I think actually this is a positive story in terms of allowing a free flow of commerce from the start of the pandemic on. Now, there have been a few hiccups along the way and probably transmission of some virus, but you know, the robustness of the Canadian economy was definitely supported by the continuation of trade between the two countries, the border crossings. And it's clear that the loose border controls for individuals, we can debate what measures could have been successful or haven't been, but clearly, you know, the variants got into the country somehow. So I think governments have some responsibility in that. And when, you know, when individuals are sick, the economy is sick too. So the second one is vaccination availability and inoculations. We all know the story about governments could have prepared us better for more vaccines availability, but I think we're in a good position now. What I'm really concerned about is or what I think we'll look back and say is, a lot of the states down south, they actually prioritize construction workers as essential workers, and many were inoculated much sooner. I'm thinking in Detroit, whether it's construction workers or people working in auto manufacturing, they had been vaccinated, you know, months ago. And you know, Canadian provinces took this, you know, the process of descending order of age, plus prioritizing front care health workers, which I think is good. But it's only now, since the end of April, that inoculations for construction is happening now, and then all adults over 18 in Ontario are now it's now available. So it's a race for all workers, no matter what sector you're working in, to get vaccinated. So I think that this probably will be looked back on as a bit of a failure. Testing too. I mean, we all know that testing kits have been available for well over a year. Governments have been sitting on them. There were some good test pilot programs. I think Alice Dawn was part of a construction program, but it was only on May, just recently, that both the federal and provincial governments announced that they have setting up websites that the testing and training for testing will be available for all sorts of businesses, and individuals can get them now at Shoppers Drug Mart. If we had testing a year ago, we probably would be able to avoid a lot of the shutdowns on some construction sites that we've seen recently. Paid sick days, this is a bit late. I don't really know how much impact that's going to have on reducing spread. And I think our industry thinks that the increase in workplace inspections is a good thing, because we all know it's hard to maintain safety standards on construction sites. So specifically looking at impacts on cement and construction, the initial construction restrictions in Ontario caused a lot of confusion. There was a lot of, I know we did a lot of advocacy with the governments on what that meant for ready-mix operations, what that meant for the cement facilities. And I think the provincial government learned from those, and the third wave restrictions that we just went through were less intrusive and allowed more construction to continue. So I think that was positive. In Ontario, construction employment is about where it was. I don't have a precise figure for the first quarter this year. Nationally, it's still down a little bit, but we've all seen the last quarter last year and early this year have been very good for construction. What I have been seeing recently is there are more media stories, whether it's in Toronto or Kingston or some other places, about construction outbreaks, and we all know that Peel and Hamilton have said that they are going to take the authority to close down construction sites. And you can see here there have been some construction sites that have been shut down, and we're all hoping and praying that the new Indian variant isn't going to make the situation worse. Globe and Mail has reported that 240 positive tests were done by Toronto Public Health. So we know what's out there, and we know that earlier government response could have probably avoided some of this, and we're hoping we don't get more media attention on these. So one thing I want to talk about today is there were some, especially in Ontario, Quebec, where there was very robust construction in the last quarter of last year. There was a tightening of supply for cement into the concrete industry, which I'm sure everyone is aware of. And I think earlier in the pandemic, with some of our, particularly in Quebec, facilities were in care and maintenance mode, everyone was expecting that construction was going to ramp down considerably. Inventory levels went down, and then we saw this boom of construction activity once, in April, May last year, that sort of led to some supply issues. So the cement industry has been impacted by this, and I know now it's becoming an issue again. And we've been talking with our CEOs that their goal is to get as much cement out into the market as possible. So they're dealing with, obviously maintenance issues at plants and keeping their employees safely operating facilities. But we know it's going to be another robust season, and we want to make sure everyone gets the supplies that they want. I'd say Ontario was the good province, the good news province in terms of construction in Canada through the pandemic. We all know the story was the hot residential market last year, but we clearly see headlining lumber costs, supply chain input costs are becoming the story of this year. So I want to show you this. This is Ontario shipments of cement over 2.25 years. I just wanted to show how the pandemic impacted. So the blue line you're seeing is an average year. I'd say it wasn't a great year for cement sales in Canada, but it wasn't a terrible year either. And you can see the seasonal demand sort of curve rising in the spring and peaking in September and then trailing off. So what we saw in the red line, which is last year, we saw this dip in April with shutdowns in Quebec and Ontario. But then as soon as it opened up, this pent up demand had this very sharp increase in demand. And the summer construction season was very positive. And the year actually ended up, the volumes about 7% more than the year before. Now, this spring, we've had very good weather conditions and spillover into some project delays, which have restarted. And so far, although we're starting to see some cooling that I'll get to, this year the volumes are very high, which is, of course, leading to some concerns about cement supply. So federal financial supports, we all know Ottawa borrowed incredible amounts of money. The wage subsidy program, the loan program, the rent subsidy program were all beneficial to a number of construction-related firms. There's the budget announced a new Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which is sort of transitioning out of emergency rent subsidy program. I think the big question is what happens in September once these programs end up. You've probably heard the concern that there are a lot of zombie companies out there. They've used these programs, they've borrowed a lot of money, they're concerned about the project pipelines and what happens when the government money runs out. So I think that's a big concern for us in Ontario. Provincially, I think last year the provincial government was very good. There was a business support grant, energy cost rebates, property rebates, WSIB, financial relief for some businesses, and a steady rate of what industrial and commercial rates were going to look like. So I think the province's response was pretty good and complementary to some of the measures that the federal government did. The other issue is some of these have expired, and what are firms going to do that are highly indebted? The scope of the financial supports in terms, this is just a chart here that shows compared to past recessions what the federal government response was relative to dollars per capita. The spend has been enormous. So that's kept a lot of businesses and individuals floating. And the personal impact is that savings and earned income last year were quite significant, and coupled with low interest rates that helped feed the demand for new home construction and the housing market generally. Business conditions, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business is very concerned about the debt taken on by many small businesses. Small businesses, particularly around construction, are a very large component. We haven't seen a lot of insolvencies yet, but these may be just delayed conditions. Now moving on to federal infrastructure support. The biggest program is, of course, the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the now mythical 10-year program that provides up to $38 billion. Ontario's share has been about $10 billion. We know that the government has been slow in rolling out this money, but as you probably all noticed, we're in pre-election mode federally, and there are announcements across the country every day about new skating rinks, new bike path trails, a lot of projects that aren't very big, but from our point of view, they're somewhat concrete intensive, which is also a benefit. But all that money is coming out of that program. Last year, the federal government responded with a specific COVID resilience funding stream and accelerated gas tax to help the municipal budgets, which were the front line of seeing a reduction in capital spending. And so far this year, the municipalities across the country are still very concerned about their sources of revenue, and there has been in this budget, federal budget, announced additional support from municipalities. I would say that the infrastructure bank is a good vehicle. It hasn't announced a lot of projects yet that I would say are traditional gray infrastructure, but I think we'll wait and see how that. The biggest issue with I think the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is going to be the building retrofit program, which I think is going to have an impact on drawing employees away from the construction industry. Anyway, that's another issue. The budget was a bit of a disappointment. The stimulus that was announced, there was certainly $104 billion announced over 3 years, but a lot of that was more for green infrastructure or for childcare benefits, helpful to the economy, but not for bricks and mortar infrastructure. An analysis by Capital Economics said that there was just $2 billion in new funding for gray infrastructure. So Ontario's capital plan, I think Ontario has an interesting case. There were other provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan that almost doubled what they were going to spend, bringing forward spending for infrastructure into last year and into this year. Initially, the finance minister said last year that Ontario was just going to stay the course with its very robust budget. The Ontario capital plan, which they announced, is extremely robust. Now, if that, we still don't know if that money will get spent over 10 years. But what Ontario did bring forward, like some other provinces, is some of the transit funding, hospitals, schools, police stations, things like that. That project, those types of projects have been accelerated. And I think we see that reflected in the P3 market update, which I also think is robust. At the end of the appendix, I won't get into it, but at the end of this presentation, there's a list of all the major projects planned in and around Toronto and whatnot. The light rail for Hamilton and the 4 projects in the GTA I think are good for the midterm outlook in the GTA. This year's Toronto capital budget was almost the same at $1 billion as it was last year, so I think that's positive. And, you know, there are other potential projects, the Highway 413, which may or may not happen depending on, you know, the federal government wants to stick its nose in. But I think largely both the federal and provincial governments have been putting infrastructure money in place, not as much as we'd like, but I still think it's going to keep a firm base of public sector-led investment. This is just a slide that shows a breakdown from Ontario's capital plan. Now I want to talk about federal policy. There are some interesting things the federal government is doing that will be supporting construction. They announced $470 million for apprenticeship service program. We all know there's a huge skills shortage. There's people that are not returning. We've got an aging workforce, and I think we have to figure out how to get more people into the trades. So I'm not sure they've figured out how they're going to do it yet, but the Ontario government is certainly being proactive in doing that as well. The retrofit program, now they just announced earlier this week that they're going to hire 2,000 people to do energy audits. But if the federal government wants to reduce emissions from the building sector, it's going to create a large new market for people doing home renovations that are separate and apart from new builds. So I'm not sure the implications of that are well understood by the federal government. Importantly, the federal government wants to attract over 400,000 newcomers. They're trying very desperately to get the numbers up because Canadian population has basically stalled. The other thing I think is worth taking a look at is the greening government strategy. We're working now with Treasury Board Canada and NRC on how they can mandate reducing embodied energy in all building materials, but also in concrete. These are ongoing policy issues, which I think are going to have major implications on new builds in the sort of midterm outlook. And of course, I think the National Infrastructure Assessment that the federal government's planning, I think is a great initiative. It's been done in England. They're actually on their second iteration. I really think in Canada, we don't have a good grasp of construction related policy, thinking of just construction and how we move it forward. The federal government has this vision of a low carbon building environment, but they don't have an understanding of how things get built right now. So I think we all need to work together to make sure we figure out a way forward that's not going to disrupt the industry. I won't get into details because I know I'm running out of time, but last year the provincial government introduced a number of pieces of legislation to get transit built faster, to ease expropriation issues, to allow construction to happen, in urban areas much quicker. There's a lot of these pieces of legislation. Bill 66 in Quebec is similar, also aimed to get projects moving. I think this is a big legacy win for the Ford government with respect to the construction industry. It's moving in the right direction. So it clearly had a mind to how to get things moving faster than they were. There's a lot more work to do in terms of regulations, getting things online, reducing time elements in approvals, but they're moving in the right direction, let me put it that way. So just switching to the economic outlook, here are the big downside risks that I see for Ontario. The Indian variant, will that cause a fourth wave? Unknown. We still have an uncertain picture about how the trades are faring in terms of their financial ability to continue if project pipelines start to slow down. Overheated housing market, what does that mean for a long-term new builds and construction? We know non-residential construction is a weak point in Ontario. It's sort of hanging on to traditional levels, but not growing. What mortgage rates are already on the way up. Lack of skilled workers we talked about. We're looking at the Buy America policy that may limit cement companies' ability to move products into the U.S. Big one, of course, is supply chain issues. There's different firms, Stats Canada and others are looking at tracking the cost of lumber. I hear prices of some products are up already over 300%. Some people are saying cost to 20 square foot home is just $40,000 additionally in just lumber alone. We know there are shortages of electrical panels, plumbing fixtures, PVC, like a whole bunch of things. This is, I think, going to be the story of this year. And I think we're already seeing a bit of a slowdown. CMHC reported this week that housing starts fell quite significantly in April. New home sales fell too, but this isn't a crisis issue. We're still at historical highs, but we are starting to feel some of the cooling effects, I think, of some of these supply chain issues. But if we look at the good news, this month's releases on building permits and total investment in building construction show almost historic levels of planned investment in Ontario. So I think that's very good. So all in all, I'm just our outlook for this year for cement sales in Ontario is plus 6%. And there we are. Sorry, I hope I didn't take too long.
No, not at all. And I forgot to mention that if anyone had any questions during the presentation, you could fill them into the question box and we try to answer them. As of right now, I have no questions. So I don't know if anyone quickly wanted to throw one in there for you. Not what we will do. I'm trying to get our new president on the line. Danny, if you can hear me, you're self-muted. Unmute yourself right now. I think I muted myself and you should be able to talk.
I am unmuted. Thank you, Brian.
Hey, right. Okay, hold on. Let me get my sharing screen back. This is so much fun during these times. You do this and you forget how to do every time. Okay, so I'm going to show my screen and go to, okay, Danny, you can start.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for introducing me, Brian. I'm Danny Salvo, and starting today, I will be acting president for this ACI-Ontario chapter. I've been on the board for a few years now, and I look forward to serving as president. We appreciate everybody joining us during these webinars during this pandemic time where we can't meet in person. We look forward to continuing to do this in the meantime and hopefully eventually get back to some in-person meetings and events as soon as possible. I will quickly go through the board members today. And starting with past president, Brian Schultz, new VP, Chris Christidis. Obviously, everybody knows Elaine Belanger as our acting secretary treasurer. Joining us today, we have two new directors, Mike Martin and Ted Moffat. Jasmine, who is an acting director, is actually on maternity leave right now, so that is why we took on two, and we look forward to when Jasmine can return. Other active directors, of course, are Richie Popoff, Steve Tavares, Stacia Van Zetten, and last but not least, Mr. Bart Canters, our director at large. A few announcements to make. As we all know, unfortunately, our ACI golf tournament was canceled due to the lockdown. It has been rescheduled for September 14th, so hopefully everybody can make that date and we're actually able to get out on the course. And looking to October, we are optimistic that we'll be able to gather in person for our annual fall seminar and Lobster Fest. Of course, we can't predict the future, and if we are not able to meet in person, we look forward to setting up some webinars similar to what we did last year, and we will send invites out and keep everyone informed. That's it for me. So I think at this point, I will pass it over to Alain to wrap things up.
Good morning, everyone. Brian, if you can put up the next slide, please. Thank you. I will give you a quick update on our financial situation. As a secretary treasurer for this chapter for many decades now, it's been a pleasure to do this and to report to you that despite the COVID pandemic, the chapter seems to be hanging in there pretty well. Our general revenues for 2020, as you can see, 133, that is down slightly from 2019, which was $145,000. And most of that is attributed to the next two categories, which is membership. Membership renewals were down quite extensively from 2019 to 2020, down roughly 40%. So it's going to be a big component of the board of directors mandate in the coming months to try and return our membership renewals back to 2019 at least levels. The good news is so far in 2021, the numbers are good. Renewals are coming back quite strongly. So we will continue on that march to try and get the numbers back up. The other big component of the change in our revenues were our general meetings. As you can see, 2020 we generated only $1,200 roughly of revenue. And that is down significantly. In 2019, we did $55,000 worth of revenue, and that's mostly from our golf tournament and from our fall concrete seminar and Lobster Fest. As you know, and as Danny just mentioned, both of them were canceled in 2019. So we're hoping to get those back up and running again later this fall. Our one category that was a saving grace for us was our certification. We had our revenues were up around 35% from 2019, and a big thanks goes out once again to Bart Canters and his team at Concrete Ontario, who did a great job of running the programs despite the pandemic. I'd also like to acknowledge two other gentlemen that do certifications up in Northern Ontario, Rob Frenette in Thunder Bay, and Pat Seguin in the Sudbury Timmins area. Pat has been a local supporter of our certification program for quite a few years, and he runs 6 or 7 programs for us yearly. As you can see, the bottom line is that we did come up with a very good profit over the past year. Our miscellaneous expenses were down significantly. No one from the chapter attended any of the ACI conventions, so that cut down on our miscellaneous expenses. So overall, our year ended quite well with a close to $30,000 profit, and we still have $4,000 in term deposits. If you have any questions, I can entertain them now, or you can email me at ACI-Ontario@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you promptly with some answers on anything you have financially. And that is it for my presentation on the financial statement. Brian, if you have any final words, we will end the annual general meeting.
Sure. I mean, my final words would be that I would like to thank Alan for all his work and patronage for the ACI, even in retirement. I know everyone needs to do something to do in their retirement, but hey, the amount of work you still continue to do for the ACI and concrete organization in Ontario is huge. And on behalf of everybody in the industry, I thank you for all your work. And I look forward to working with the new members of the board as being the past president and sitting back and having a drink or two with everybody once things get better. And I also want to thank Alan, Mr. Body there, for being the past president that just finished up. So everybody, thanks very much. I hope you stay safe and enjoy your summer, and we'll see you in the fall.
Thank you.